Happy Thursday, you guys. This week has flown by. Flown by, flown by. Okay, I'll put my glasses on. I have met this fantastic author, and she is such a beautiful person. I cannot wait for you guys to invite.
Hello.
That went smooth.
That was smooth.
So welcome
How
to
are you?
Let's Go Live. I'm Gigi Maurer, and I have with me, get ready for it, adoption parent coach, children's book author, co-producer of her mother's memoir, and a mindset coach. Welcome, Francine Apy.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Francine Apy.
So I'm so excited. We got a chance to talk yesterday behind the scenes, but I am so excited for people to get to know you the way I got to know you yesterday. So we will start with the children's book, then we can get into your mama's memoir. Oh, you have
Sure.
it with you?
I
Yeah, let's
do.
see.
Here
It
it
is
is.
adorable, I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really happy with it.
So for those, it's backwards. So go ahead and just read the title so everyone can.
Sure. Yeah. So the title of it is Brianna's Brave Day at School, and it's an adoption theme book for ages around 4 to 8. So I just did a classroom reading today in second grade, and just great conversation that comes from it. So yeah,
Okay, I do want to talk about that because how you got started doing that, but I feel like that's like halfway through the story.
yeah,
So let's start at the beginning of the story. You wrote a children's book. It is adoption themed. What made you write it?
sure. So my background is in 25 years, over 25 years of HR leadership. And my husband and I were blessed with our 3 sons through adoption. And our adoption actually has been in our family story for over 30 years. So I'm the youngest of 4 girls. And out of 4 of us, 3 of us have been unable to conceive and have children. So adoption is really just, I never remember a time when adoption wasn't part of our story. And so that's really always been part of my journey. And my HR background is really was my profession. And we had an opportunity to sell our company. And I took some time to reflect. And actually, a dear friend of mine who happens to be an adoptee, we walk every week together. And this was 2 years ago. And I wished her happy birthday. And she said, "Thank you, my soul filling friend, Fran." And I said, soul filling, that's a beautiful word. You hear fulfilling
Mm-hmm.
or soulful music or food.
Yep.
And long story short is I just kind of sat with that word and was like, really what like fills my soul and what keeps me going and makes me excited for the next day, if you will. And it's really my children and being blessed with my son's amazing birth mothers and their whole journey. And so that's what spurred me into creating my company Soul Filling, which my main mission is to help make the conversation of adoption more mainstream and modern and current and relevant in
Mm-hmm.
2025 at home, work, and school. And shortly after I launched, I had major surgery, a full knee replacement.
Oh
So I
my
had
gosh.
some time and had first, I actually helped bring my mom's memoir to life. And we got to the end of that project, and the person I was working with, the book coach, said, "Fran, we have some more time. Do you have any interest in writing another book?" And I said, "Well, I would love to write a children's book, and that would really check the box for me helping to make the conversation more casual at school in that informal setting." And that's where
Okay,
Brianna came. So this was just about a year ago. She came to life.
I have a zillion questions, but first, that beautiful painting behind you, is that your three adoptive boys?
Yes. A few years ago, they're 23, 20, and 18 now, but that was at
Oh,
the Grand Canyon a few years back, a backdrop of them. Yeah.
that is so sweet. So, to start at the beginning, isn't it quite rare statistically that, out of four daughters, three are not able to conceive. And then there's adoption. I feel like there's so many synchronicities in your universe. Not only is it you, it's your two other sisters. You have this walking friend who has it. You will tell us the story of your mother who is affected by adoption. It just seems to be all these synchronicities of the universe.
There is a bigger plan there. I truly believe that, there are no mistakes, and there are these, life is what happens when you're busy making plans, and you think you have it all figured out. And I know the plan. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that, and marry the great guy, and get the job. And sometimes, in my opinion, I think God has a great sense of humor, and He's like, "Yeah, you just keep, yeah,
Oh,
that
yeah, he
that's how
does.
it's going to go."
Yeah,
That's
you're like, I
exactly
got
how
the
it's going to go.
blueprint. Thank you. I got this under control, everybody. And
Exactly.
it's not at all how it goes.
Exactly. Right. However, that all being said, I was born to be a mother. There was no doubt in my mind that I was not going, that was not an option. And so for me, I quickly, and even before my husband and I, learned that we weren't able to give birth, I wasn't able to have children, give birth to children. Adoption was on our heart early on in our relationship. So it was an easy transition for us.
So let's kind of unpack that a little bit because when you and I spoke, you had some fascinating insights to what adoption looks like today, what it looked like when you adopted your boys 2 decades ago, and kind of there's a stigma around it.
Sure. So, a lot of times, Gigi, I really just feel that it's just lack of education, like with anything. If you never experienced a family member or a dear friend go through cancer, it's hard to know how to be with that person, right? Or know what to say or when to say, or do they need help or do they not? And, or whatever topic may be. There may be divorce in your story. There may be, many different things. And when you're not familiar with it, we usually do two things. We say nothing or we say the wrong thing. And sometimes both of those things can be hurtful.
Yeah.
So for me, unless you have adoption in your story, or you have friends who have adopted, or you have friends who are adoptees, it's not something you think about all the time. So
Mm-hmm.
then what are you going on? You're going based on what you've seen in movies, what you see in media, what you've read in books, what you read in an article, and that becomes what you know and believe the situation to be. And long story short, adoption, the history of adoption is not the most easy to process, if you will, right? And it's a difficult one, because when we begin talking about the early days of adoption, it was a lot of secrecy. It was a lot of don't talk about it. It was a lot of let's pretend it didn't happen. Let's match families that look like each other so that no one ever thinks about it. And you can imagine the difficulty, right, that comes to fruition when children learn as young adults or as adults that they were adopted. And why is this a secret? This must be a bad thing. This isn't something we are
Yeah.
proud of, right? This
Yeah.
is if
Shame
you
and
will
guilt
watch
around it because that's what
shame.
we put. We package
Exactly.
secrets in shame and guilt.
Exactly, exactly. So that has evolved and changed so much, closed adoptions, right? All those records that nobody had access to. And so now take us into 2025. And if you were to adopt today, I would, I'd put money on it. It would be hard to find an adoption that there is no form of contact at all, right?
Oh.
So maybe even if it's just pictures through your attorney or pictures through, an agreement that you have with the birth family. But some level of openness of adoption is pretty much the standard now. In not all cases, I don't like to speak in black and white. There's a lot of
Right.
gray. Um, so that's changed significantly, which of course with that becomes much more open and honest dialogues, right, around adoption. And then the other big piece is language, right? In years past, you gave your child up for adoption. Now the language is a birth mother says, I created an adoption plan for my child. I chose not to parent my child. I chose to give birth to my child, right? But I chose not to parent for whatever adult reason that person chose that, or if they were a young person, whatever reason they chose that, they chose not to parent. Who are your real parents? Well, I think birth mothers are real, and I think adoptive moms are real. We're both very real people. So birth family, biological family, adoptive family, right? So just that language of just helping to change how we talk about adoption can help remove some of those stigmas.
Yeah, to be more sensitive of all the parties involved. Is that what led you to becoming an adoption coach for the parents?
Yeah, yeah. At the end of the day, this pendant that I have that I think I mentioned to you, I commissioned a local jeweler. So the unofficial adoption symbol is a triangle and a heart, right? So the triangle is what brings a family. It's the three sides that bring an adoption family together. The birth family, adoptive family, and the child brought together by love. And so for me, to deny any one of those sides their voice in their story is just not okay. It's just not okay. Now I get a little emotional sometimes when I talk about this because it's the lack of balance in years past in the adoption story and the lack of information a child and adoptee was not purview to, in the way birth mothers maybe were told they needed to feel and they weren't supported through proper therapy, breaks my heart, really.
Yeah.
And if there's anything I can do on this time I have left to help change that dialogue and to help bring to light that all sides of those conversations have a story to tell and that needs to be told.
That's beautiful. And I know that you, having the own experience 3 times, I'm sure not every one of those times and going through the process were exactly the same. So you come from a place of love, compassion, and also expertise.
Mm. You could say I'm an expert of a lived adoption experience. That's what I'm an expert in. I am an expert in. And so as an adoption parent coach,
Mhm.
quite honestly, I'll talk to anybody on the triad, right? If you're an adoptee and you love the family that raised you, you're very curious about your biological family, which is very normal,
Yeah.
but you just want some help in how to come up with the right language to broach the topic, because a lot of times the child doesn't want to bring up the topic, right? Because they don't want to make their family, their mom and their dad, feel bad
Yeah. Hurt
and make them
feelings.
feel ungrateful, and that whole
Yeah.
grateful word, that's a whole nother thing. But so I certainly could talk through with that person because I lived through that experience and I raised my children to feel confident. And hence, that's why the book was written, because it's based on an actual event that happened to my son.
Well, isn't
But then,
there a natural curiosity? I mean, isn't it?
100%.
We all want to know who we are and where we came from at a fundamental level. So I would imagine it could be hurtful to ask the questions, but how do you squash that curiosity?
Right. And to me, it's squashing a piece of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's squashing a
Mm-hmm.
piece of their story.
100%.
And and I always, another book that I'm working on, we're really more alike than not in raising a family through adoption or not. At the end of the day, we're all going to have good days and bad days. We're all going to be frustrated with our siblings or our parents. We're all going to go through that awkward teenage years.
Yes.
We're all going to have our hearts broken. We're all going to get acne, most likely. So those fundamental things of like growing up and living, we all can experience. And for
Yeah.
me, there
Humanity.
isn't, pardon me?
Humanity.
Humanity, right. But for me, I never want to underestimate, there is another lens, and that lens is through the lens of adoption. And, my mom, I won't jump ahead too much, but she was born in Ukraine. She left Ukraine at 5 years old. I never met her parents. She, left at a very young age. We don't know a lot about her family history. So that's her story, right? She was never adopted. She lived through foster care in Europe. But at the end of the day, even if you don't have adoption in your story, nobody can get all the answers that they want. Some people are fascinated by it, right? And they do all the DNA
Yeah.
testing and they want to go back into that little village that their family came from. And other people, they're like, it's not that important to me. It's
Correct.
here and now. But adoption, if you have that in your story and that's important to you, it could be more challenging to get all those details, right? For obvious reasons.
Mhm.
But I think it's human nature to be curious where you came from, for sure.
And you said there's different roads to adoption. There's just not one path to adoption. There's multiple ways to adopt.
Sure. So, a lot of times when people think about adoption, they may think of foster care. So
Mhm.
foster care is its own path of to adoption. And that's certainly a viable, awesome path. And we know currently there are over 100,000 children available for adoption. So,
That's
and I don't
a
know if that's the right
staggering
terminology, so
amount of
forgive me,
children.
but 100, and I think it's up to 120,000. So we know there are children in the foster care system
Mhm.
who would love to have adoption in their story. And then you have international adoption, which that has evolved and changed so much. Again, I'm not overly familiar with either one of those because I did not go that path. But international adoption, then you're putting in a whole other layer of culture and their laws and all the complexities that come along with the complexities because it's international, right? So
Mhm.
that's its comes with its own set of rules and guidelines. And then you have an agency adoption. So if you're interested in adopting, you go to an agency and help me find a birth family, help me be matched, right,
Mhm.
to complete my family. And then there's private adoption, which is what all three of mine were. It's just between you, your birth mother, and the attorney. And that's it. There's not an agency. So an agency is there to kind of guide you and set guidelines and say, this is what you do then, this is how you do it, those sorts of things. In our situation, we didn't need that guidance. So we were very fortunate. And so we went directly the private route.
And I know that you hear that sometimes it can be very costly.
Mm-hmm.
If it sounded like there was four different
Mm-hmm.
methods to adopt. Does price also become four different prices?
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. The pricing today, the cost today for adoption is astronomical,
Why
on many
is
different
that?
levels.
If you have so many children in need, so many families that want children placed in their home, why is it so expensive?
It's a
I'm
great
uneducated.
question, and I'm going to learn more about that because I'll be talking, and this is a little plug for anyone who listens and they're intrigued by adoption, and from a financial standpoint, it is a burden. Becky Fawcett has started a non-for-profit which is called Help Us
Mm.
Adopt, and I believe, her grant for this year is $2.7 million. Her non-for-profit gives to families that they can afford to raise a child, right? They have a home, they have all the financial needs and requirements to raise a child, but the legal costs and the agency costs, and if it's international, those costs are prohibitive. And some people, will go and deplete their 401k or their profit sharing plan or a life insurance policy or many different ways because they don't have that extra, 30 to $50,000 sometimes sitting around
Oh, wow.
to adopt. So she's doing amazing work in the field of bringing families together when it's the only reason keeping them from, they've been approved and everything on the adoption side is the financial aspect.
My goodness. I know because that should be the last consideration. To me, it's the safety of the children, the safety of the home that they're placed in, if it's a right fit between the parents, the existing family who's coming in. I always think, but I hate that it's kind of a money, like a profitable business.
Yeah, and again, I need to educate myself more on it. Our situation was not that way at all. We just had our attorneys and that was it. So I do need to educate myself more to help coach people through that process. I have other resources and great people to connect. I'm a connector too, if you haven't noticed. If I don't have the answer, I will find the answer for you,
Yeah.
whether it's adoption or not. I'm a researcher and I get the answer because there's always an answer. I love a challenging
Oh,
question.
bless your heart, because there are people that love it and those that hate it, and there seems to be like no in between.
Yeah, no, I love a challenge of a question and that's why I sometimes cringe a little bit because others have called me an expert. You're the adoption expert. I'm like, I'm really not. Like I am in some regards. They're like, "No, you are." I'm like, "No,
So,
not in all
so
aspects."
you have three adoptive boys that you're obviously their real mother, quote. No, you're their
Wow.
mother. But you also have siblings. You said that they were unable to. And so yesterday when we chatted, there is actually 11 grandkids from you four girls.
That's right.
So did they adopt as well, your siblings?
Yeah, so out of the 11 grandchildren, eight are adopted. So my oldest sister was able to give birth to her three daughters, who are all grown now. And then the other five children are all adopted as well.
That's phenomenal, though.
Yeah. It's when I really think about it, when you're in something, you're just kind of in it and it's your life.
Yeah,
And
and you don't think
it
twice
was like,
about it.
that's all we knew. And it
Yeah.
was so normal and it was so like open. And I mean, from the minute my nieces and nephews were placed in our arms, we talked adoption. We used the word adoption. The
Mm-hmm.
minute my kids, I think I told you I was in the delivery room for all three of our sons. And literally, I began using the word adoption. I always wanted them to know it's a beautiful word. So yeah, it's just always been there.
I love that. Statistically, it's probably not that common, but it's beautiful. It just goes to show that you guys are a servant heart family.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So, what led into writing this book? And especially, why did you choose it from a children's point perspective and not a nonfiction to parents that are looking?
Sure. So I have a few different books in the works, but I wanted to start with this one because, my mission is to help make the conversation of adoption more mainstream at home, work, and school. And when I had time to reflect on what's my lead into schools,
Mm-hmm.
I thought of a book. But what it made it super easy is I quickly recalled a story that happened to my son when he was in second grade.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the book is about. So it's exactly what happened to him when an adoption topic came up in a very negative way at school. He
Oh,
put his hand up and he said who his birth mother is, and he said how she came about to make her decision. And for me, I still get goosebumps when I say it. For me, that was probably one of the proudest days of my life as a parent. At the end of that school, he's 20 now, so it really impacted me. But when you go for pickup at the end of the day and the teacher waves you over, like, I want to talk to you. I want to talk about, I'm like, and you can't help but to think, oh no, what they do. And she said, "You would have been so proud of your son Matthew today." I'm like, "What happened?" And, this little girl said something very negative about adoption, and he put his hand up and he just said what adoption is. And she said, we didn't go back to our lesson plan. We just talked about how families come together.
oh,
And
wow.
that adoption is one way. And she said one kid after the next wanted to share something unique and different in their family,
Right.
in their story. And I thought, just like today, Gigi, in this little second grade class, when I'm explaining, because at the end of my book, I have a little facts section about adoption and things, did you know kind of things. And I was sharing like the adoption pendant and the birth family. He raised his hand. Now, birth family, what does that mean? What does a birth mother mean?
Love
And
it.
so I kind of explained, in a second grade way. And he's like, wow, that's a lot to think about, but that's really cool. Like, and that's all I want. I want them to then go home. I always leave a copy of the book in the classroom. So that'll be my little legacy in their classroom that
Mm-hmm.
they go home and they now have a little bit more of language around adoption and what it means. So then the next time they see somebody, they have a reference point and be like, oh, that's right. We heard about this book and that means, and then that thought grows, right? As they continue to grow and
Well,
develop.
and it's a positive reflection. You're taking it to educate them. And it's beautiful that the teacher stopped the lesson to have this round robin discussion, because that's where all you're asking is to have a productive conversation.
That's right. And she did that all those years ago, right?
Yeah.
All those years ago. So, and it was great, not to get off story, but it was a really a full circle moment for me a few weeks back when I went back to Matthew's school to read the book. And the granddaughter of the teacher who Matthew had was in the classroom.
Oh, you're kidding. Oh my gosh.
No.
See, synchronicities of the universe for
So
sure.
I had bumped into Mrs. Faustini as the teacher, not Mrs. Hamilton, who I call her in the book. But I bumped into her in the grocery store and she knew all about the book. And she's like, I'm absolutely buying a copy of the book. And then I texted her, we swapped numbers because I'm going to take her to lunch. And we swapped numbers and I texted her saying, I'm going to St. Clements today to read. She's like, my granddaughter is going to be with you. I was just going to text you. So it's just a full circle moment, and that's all I want. I just want people to feel more comfortable, to have the language, to know that it's okay to talk about.
Yeah. We had a comment, promises, says, makes for a great Christmas family with that many around. And I was thinking the same thing. Christmases have to be like noisy, loud, and fun.
Yeah, there's no quiet in my family. Even without the kids, there's a lot of strong personalities. But yeah, it was great. I think the first five of the grandchildren all came within 3 years. So, like, my sister gave birth, my other two sister adopted her son, and then my other two sister adopted two that are 4 months apart. And so she adopted two 4 months apart, so they're almost like twins. So we were definitely, it was very active and festive
Well,
for
it's
sure.
nice because cousins get to grow up together, and that's getting to be a lot more rare than it used to be.
Hmm. Mine are a little bit younger than my sister's kids, but your family's your family, right? And then you create your family beyond your family with your friends and in that whole circle. But yeah, it was never, a lot of times, Gigi, in years past, when you talk about adoption, you'll say, when did you tell them that they were adopted? Like, today we don't have these like sit down meetings. Like, today we're going to talk about, something,
Yep.
God, and if it does happen that way, whenever you talk about it, just do it. If you wish you did it sooner, if you wish woulda, coulda, shoulda, but right now is the right time. If you haven't yet,
Mm-hmm.
right now is the right time.
I want to talk though, going back to your book. How do you get into classrooms? Are you invited? Do you pitch yourself? Because that can be pretty daunting. And the subject matter is not necessarily easy.
Yeah, well, I guess as you probably know as an author, I start with people I know and I
Mhm.
start with the schools that I know. So that's made it very easy for me. And a dear friend of mine and teacher, she actually is in the process of an adoption finalization the second time for her through foster care.
Wow, that's
Yeah, and
wonderful.
hers are little, 3 and 1.5. So she was an easy class. So I'm starting with the people that I know in
Hmm.
schools that I know, and then I also recently reached out to the Ronald McDonald House, and I just have been added on their list. So
That's huge.
schools, yeah, is that, I'm learning as I go. And somebody said, you need to, reach out to them. And we actually ended up talking and they're going to have my mom's book as well. But I just got that final communication actually
Ah,
yesterday. You're officially in the system. So teachers and schools can find me through that way as well.
well,
But
congratulations, because that is a beautiful organization. I'm in Houston. It's a very big organization here. And so that is a coup de grace, like a feather in your cap that you are on the
yeah,
list.
Hey, appreciate that. My niece is in Houston, actually.
Hey.
Yeah.
So how on that book you said you have others. So this was the first one. I
Mhm.
think your second one you said is we're not that different.
Well, the first one I did was I my was my mom's, right? So I self-published her book, and then once I was done with that, I did Brianna, and then another children's book is almost done is Hearts Around the World. Can you count them all?
That's
So it's a
so
heart,
cute.
it's a
Tell
heart
us
thing.
what that is about.
So that is about so what part of my mission is to just bring adoption to the table. It doesn't need to be the leading role. It just wants a seat at the table. So in this particular book, there's no leading role. There's Brianna's not in the book. Actually, she is in the book, but she doesn't have a leading role. And I just love hearts. I happen to have a lot of photographs of hearts. And then when I started to do some research, there's natural landscapes around the world that naturally are the shape of a heart. Yeah,
Really?
like mountainsides and lakes.
That is
And
so cool.
and so I've blended the different photographs, and I'm having the same illustrator paint them for me, but different photographs between my pictures, between the natural settings, and then of course Brianna's going to be wearing her adoption pendant. So that's how adoption will have a seat at the table and a notation that, oh, she has an adoption symbol on. So I'm weaving it into the story, but I'm not making it into
Yeah, the
the purpose of the
central theme.
story, the central theme. And then it's the power of not only the importance of taking care of your physical heart, but your emotional heart. And how can you take care of your physical heart and your emotional heart?
Oh, I love that. Is that still for the same ages of 4 to 8?
I think so. Maybe depending on, I reversed the process a little bit. I actually explained to my illustrator what the book was going to be about, and I provided her ideas around the pictures that I wanted her to draw. And I'm having her draw the pictures first, and then I'm going to write. So depending on how all that comes together, the way I'm seeing the pictures, it's probably going to be that age group again.
Yeah.
Um, but then the other book that has been going on in the backdrop for a while is called The Places Our Feet Have Taken Us. And that will be, I'm looking to collect 33 stories at a time of adoption stories that show resilience, that show strength, that show compassion, that show acceptance, and help to when they did get stuck, because whether you have adoption in your story or not, we get stuck on our journeys. How did they get unstuck? What did they do? Like I wanted to have a lesson in there. And I love the imagery of our feet take us where on our journeys, and incorporating as many of those stories as I can to begin to help to change the narrative, right, around how people think of adoption, and help to get the message out of how much it's evolved.
Do you have those 33 contributing stories yet?
No,
So
I don't.
people, if
I have
people are
about
listening,
8. I know people listening.
if people are
So
listening, whether live or after, how would they, and they want to contribute their story, how do they reach out to you and do that?
sure. So my website is soulfillingadoption.com. And if you just click on the link, share my story, there's a very basic out, like 4 questions. So it's literally takes 10 minutes as a preliminary. And then once you do that, if it's a story that, makes sense for us to move forward based upon them learning more about me and what the mission of my story is, then we take it to the next step.
That's exciting. So that one has a little bit more work to do since it's more interactive. And then
Yes.
you had mentioned of another book,
Um,
the one that
well,
we're not
the we're more alike than different is
more like than different.
really, yeah, is really weaved in the places where our feet have taken us. And I do a lot of blog posts around that in my social media.
Mhm.
posts around that. So I don't have a book per se yet in the works. Someone did actually mention, was it you yesterday or was it somebody else? Because it's now not no, it was someone else today to write my mom's story in a children's book version. They're
That would
like, I
be fun.
know you have a lot on your plate, but when do you think? I'm like, that would be a great idea.
But I tell you, your titles are the best.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I know. I mean, when you are have so many ideas, people use AI, but you're like, can I just download my brain into AI? That's, that has all this stuff floating around in my head.
I know. I know. I have a lot of journals. I do a lot of journaling and a lot of writing. Um, and then it's just I need to finish this and then I can go back to the other ideas. Yeah.
Exactly. So leading into your mama,
Hmm.
she has a beautiful story. You were helping her with her book. So can you tell us the title of her book and what it is about and then her story?
You bet. Sure.
Fascinating.
Sure. So both of these are available, of course, on Amazon or on my website. But Dominica's story, you can see her little picture here. Dominica's story, a life of courage, hope, and love. So this was her probably when she was around 7 years old. And basically it's a very quick read. I mean, you can see, I would say it's for anyone, I would say from third grade on, to be honest. I actually recently shared it with an elementary school that they're going to incorporate it into their curriculum, and then in a high school as well in US world history.
Oh, wow.
Um, but long story short is, for as long as I can remember, we always wanted to write my mom's story because it is an incredible story. And if we ever like wanted an A in a paper for history, philosophy, religion, just write mom's story. Just write mom. If you just write mom's story, you can weave it in anywhere. Just write mom's story. So we have many versions of mom's story that really helped us with our grades. We
Through all you
definitely had that.
girls. What if you four girls ended up with the same like English teacher who's like, oh God, not this
This
story
looks
again?
really familiar. And no, you can't write your mother's story again. We all know. My whole little town knew my mom's story. And so, long story short, fast forward and we moved to where we're living now. And I was working hot lunch, which I always volunteered at the kids' school. And I got talking to this nice, great mom.
Mhm.
And, oh, where do you work? Oh, I work at Skidmore College. And I said, oh, what do you teach? Well, she teaches Russian and Ukrainian. Um, History. Yeah,
Oh
she's
my
associate
gosh.
professor. And I said, really? I said, my mom was born in Ukraine. She was. I mean, and Kate wrote this book like this thick about the history of Ukraine.
Unreal.
And
Again, synchronicities.
I'm telling you, I'm telling you. And so I said, I know we just met, but I would love would you ever consider writing my mom's memoir? She's like, I would be honored. And I said, oh my gosh, this is like incredible
Mhm.
because I always wanted it to be more than then my mom,
Yeah.
moved to this orphanage. Like, so what she was able to do, she was able to truly paint the history and the backdrop of what was going on in Ukraine at the time with
Mhm.
maps in photographs. We actually found that there's all kinds of maps that map where my mother lived and trade. I mean, she did all this
Wow.
research to make this book come to life and to really give it the relevance isn't the right word, to really give it the the intensity of really what my mother lived through and experienced as a little girl. And so as the story goes, she's the youngest actually of five girls. And they were living on a farm in Ukraine, and World War II broke out. And my mom and her sister, that she was the closest with, got hit with shrapnel in the field.
Wow.
They were picked up just like what you see going on in Ukraine today. They were picked up by German soldiers and put on a train, and no one was keeping track of anyone, and brought to the hospital. And long story short is my mom and her sister thought her parents were killed, and vice versa.
Wow.
Nobody kept track of things. Nobody. And so my mom's sister was 12, so she was 8 years older than my
Mhm.
mom. So the two of them were able to stay together throughout foster care, but everyone, as the story goes, is the truth, wanted to adopt my mom. She was only 5, and she was still young and
Little.
moldable, and yeah, and but nobody wanted to adopt my aunt.
Mm.
And so at the end of the day, my aunt said, we're not being separated, and they stayed together. And they stayed together. I won't give the whole story, but they stayed together until my aunt was 18 and she could sponsor my mom to come to this country
Wow.
through Catholic Charities. So
Unbelievable.
that's how they got here. And so I won't give away any more of the story. Like literally, my friends and people that I know, and you can go on Amazon and you can see the reviews. You get a good cup of coffee or tea and just get a cozy corner and you'll just flip right through it. And it's really amazing. And so she came to this country, and you'll hear what happened, which was nothing short of a miracle. But to meet her today, you'd never know. She's 86 years old. You'd never know, like growing up, that my mom had the childhood that she had, and
Hmm.
still has the shrapnel wounds in her back, in the back of her shoulder and on her
Wow.
leg. um, she, got most popular in her class in high school, most likely to smile and lend the help. And so I share that with you because I talk a lot about in my work within the adoption space of resilience.
Hmm.
And a lot of times we're hearing so much more about mental health
Yeah.
and all those topics. They're serious and they're real topics. And there's such power and strength and resilience when we can find those tools, when we can dig in and get through those difficult times and get to the other side, as we all know, most usually much stronger, right? And so my mom is the epitome of that. So it's just kind of interesting how her book came to life. And then I continued on this journey through adoption. Um, and my mom didn't have a traditional upbringing, right?
Mhm.
She gravitated to teachers who took her under her wing. My aunt was the role model, her mom role model. And so yeah, so basically we wrote this book, Gigi, actually in 2016,
Mhm.
and I went to Kinko's and I made 50 copies.
I love
And we had a
that.
surprise party for my mom. And we invited our friends and family who could come. And
Mhm.
we had the unveiling. She didn't know the book was done.
Oh.
And so the book, so we did that and it was great. And so the book says by Dominica niece as told to Kate Graney. So she's the professor. And then
Mhm.
Caitlin McQuaid. And Caitlin McQuaid comes in. So that was 2016. And we had the celebration and we checked the box. We wrote mom's book. And then, COVID happened, of
Yeah.
course. And then everything that was going on in Ukraine now happened in 2021, 2022. And so I went back to Kate and I said, gosh, Kate, can we write another few chapters? And during that time, a lot happened in my mom's life too. Add a few
Mhm.
chapters, share how history is repeating itself again. And I think at this time, I self publish it and we get it out to the world in a bigger
Yeah.
way as a sign of hope, as a sign of resilience, and as a sign for the Ukrainian people. And to tie it back to adoption, all proceeds from this book go to the Center for Adoption Support and Education out of Washington, D.C., who, in my opinion, does the best work in training and educating adoption competent therapists, which they is a real thing and is really needed in the adoption community. So
So I have.
we rebundled it, and so that's when I came up with the cover and the forward and the epilogue
Mhm.
and did the legwork to make it happen and get it up on Amazon.
Okay, so I bet your mother was very, very proud of you guys and probably overwhelmed. What a beautiful gift.
Yeah, she was pretty overwhelmed. She's a pretty humble person, and she was very very moved by it, to say the least.
How did that impact you guys growing up, though?
You know, Gigi, it's like one of those things, like I mentioned with adoption. It was just always part of our story, right?
Mhm.
That we have a little bit, just a sidebar. My dad is a very funny guy. He's a ball buster. I mean, we grew up, it was like you carried your own luggage. We were not coddled,
Oh,
little girls. We were like, my dad's like, there's no way I can do this for all of So everyone just kind of take care of yourself, do what you need to do.
independent.
And but there was a joke in our family that when we would go on vacation or be out to dinner or people you meeting new people and, oh, where are you from? And then my mom, do I say Ukraine? Do I just say I'm from upstate New York? What do I say? And so my dad, the running joke is, say you're from Pittsburgh. Nobody will, okay, you're just from Pittsburgh. Just say you're from Pittsburgh. Just say you're from Pittsburgh. Anywhere but Ukraine. Because the minute they said she was from Ukraine, the story came
Yeah.
out.
Oh,
And
I see.
so it was never a short story because
Of
as
course.
as we talk, well, then what happened there? And then what happened? And then what happened? Um, so that was growing up, it was just always part of my mom's story. And my mom and my aunt are very different and they chose very different paths. My
Mm.
mom married, 100% American. My dad is his 100% Italian descendants, not from Italy, and big, big, big Italian family. And my mom, really embraced my dad's family, and we didn't speak Ukrainian in the home.
Mhm.
Sometimes she made halupki and pigs in the blanket, and I was the only one that ate kibasi. I was the only one that ate the food. So she really didn't like bring in a lot of the Ukrainian culture,
Yeah.
whereas my aunt did. She married
Oh,
a Ukrainian American. All five of their children speak, read, and write Ukrainian. They do the Ukrainian dance, the embroidery, the Easter eggs, and so their lives, and that's the difference, right? Between
mhm.
leaving your country at 5 as opposed to 12, and then coming to this country at 12 as opposed to 18. So the mindsets were different. So we always kind of had my mom's version of, I'm an American, we're going to speak English. And and for her, it was hard enough for her to learn English. She didn't want us to feel, and who's speaking Ukrainian? I mean, let's be honest, at the time,
Not as
our little
common.
town, there was nowhere we were going. And so we didn't learn as much, but we learned so much from my aunt, and she is the epitome of resilience and of strength, and what she did to support my mother all those years as a young girl herself. But she chose to come to this country and still really live, her Ukrainian culture fully.
Well, I'd imagine it's a lot of self-sacrifice, and if she could have been, your mom could have adopted, and they decided to stay together, and then go another, what, 6, 10 years,
Hmm.
and it's like you girls had the experience of both this big, loud, ruckus Italian family. My sister is married to an Italian, and so I know how
Yeah.
it's an experience when you Christmas and Thanksgiving and the opinions and the ball busting and all that. It's
Yes.
fun.
Not a shy one in the bunch.
Oh, you got to hold your own. But to have that, but then also have this extension back to this life that you really should be a part of, but you may not have been a part of. I mean, what a beautiful dichotomy that you get all of it.
Yeah, it was really quite fascinating, and I think we touch on this in the book. We definitely touch on this in the book. But I had an amazing experience with my mom in 1990 when the Iron Wall came down and Ukraine opened up, and it was safe for Ukrainian Americans to
Back
go to Ukraine.
home.
My
Mhm.
mom and I went back to Ukraine to her village with
Wow.
my aunt and my cousin, and
That
we
had to be
got to
difficult.
incredibly, incredibly. And but at the end of the day, my mom, it was a lifetime ago for her. Like I think it was a great to put closure, to see people, to see your homeland again, because she never thought she was going to see it again,
Mhm.
right? There was no let's just go to Ukraine and then leave. There was this uncertainty, this uneasiness of, you know, will I be able to come home?
Oh,
There
sure.
wasn't it was not something that was even thought of. But always from when I was little, we always were shipping boxes to Ukraine, of soap and clothes. And, we put that in the box for Ukraine, put that in the box for Ukraine. So we grew up with like, Ukraine needs support,
Hmm.
Ukraine needs help, like
Hmm.
Ukraine. And so that mindset was always there. Um, in Ukraine, a lot of people, I remember when my mom got her driver's license very late in life. She was 40. When she put, where were you born? Ukraine. And the person said, what state is that in? So, I don't know if it was that unknown at that time, but I think everyone in the world, sadly, unfortunately, for the reason, knows
Yeah.
Ukraine today. Even the little girl, and I'll just give a shout out to how smart our young children are today in the second grade class. I shared that they asked, "Who's the illustrator of your book?" And I said, "Well, she's actually from Poland." And they were fascinated. They wanted to find out how I found this illustrator. Anyway, long story short, the teacher said, "Well, one of our classmates' mom is from Poland." And I said, "Well, my mom's from Ukraine." And the three little hands went up in the air and said, "Mrs. Appy, I hope your mom's not in Ukraine now."
Wow,
I was like,
they knew. Second
"They knew."
grade.
I said, "I'm really proud of you,
Wow.
for knowing." And they're like, "Yeah, that's a terrible war. I'm glad she's not there now."
I
So I
think
was
I was
like,
playing with
wow.
Barbies. I was in Barbies and I didn't know what my parents did or where they're even in the house. So to
Right.
have that kind of awareness,
Yeah. And they didn't know who I was, and it wasn't like you're preparing to talk about Ukraine, and whatever. So
yeah.
it's to me, it's an inspiration for me to be with the young people.
The one thing you said that I find terribly heartbreaking is they got separated and neither one knew. Were they ever able to reconcile or find out that they were okay? Their girls made it out, or the girls found out about their parents.
Well, you tell me, as an Amazon bestseller, should I tell you what happens?
You can DM me, okay? We'll keep
Okay,
the no spoilers, but
I'll DM you. I'll DM you because it gets very interesting. I'll leave it at
oh
that.
yeah, then we're not going to ruin the surprise.
Yeah, gets
Got to
very
buy it to
interesting.
find out.
That's
And when
right.
you buy it, the proceeds go to, you said, the adoption agency or the center. I'm going to slaughter this. Go ahead and say it.
That's okay. The acronym is the word CASE, so that kind of
Yeah.
makes it easy to remember, but it's the Center for Adoption, Support, and Education. And they're out of Maryland, and they are provide tremendous um, mental health support services for the adoption community. But what I love a lot of what they do, but they also train other therapists throughout the country. I believe they've trained in 33 different states,
Wow.
different therapists to be adoption competent in their therapy. So, like, for example, I'm a true believer in therapy,
Mhm.
and even for my children. And as they were growing up, if we moved, we found a dentist, I found the yoga studio, I found the church, I found the grocery store, and I wanted to find a therapist. And only one time out of all those years did I find one that said, I'm have some adoption competency.
Wow.
And so that gets
I,
really hard to find the services that you need. But now, today in 2025, I mean, it's not, super easy to find, but it's
mhm.
definitely more available.
Yeah, I was going to say it seemed rather specialized, pretty niched to find.
That's right. That,
Hmm.
that's right. But it's great that the Center for Adoption Support and Education, provided this full curriculum to be able to train other therapists, and they can do that remotely, which is great.
Yeah, because therapy is important and also finding the right therapist for your boys or for anyone that's seeking help. It's relationship. You have to make sure you have the right fit.
That's right. And that's for anyone on the triad, right? So an
Yep.
adoptee
Everybody.
who is, everyone on that triangle is dealing with something of loss,
Yeah,
of
they're
something
piece
they
of it.
weren't planning on, a piece of life that they weren't planning on.
Hmm.
And with that comes some extra complexities and some additional layer of questioning and figuring out, if you will, of how to move through that. So for sure.
Well, and I mean, with any kind of therapy, you only see your side of your perspective. You can't see the forest through the trees. And so I think it does take someone from the outside, a more objective, to kind of take a holistic approach or view and then introduce other pieces that you haven't thought about or you weren't exposed to. And I think that's also why that probably helps. Like you're saying on the triad, maybe you go from just the birth mother, you go from you as the adoptive parents or the boys, but everybody has a piece. And so you're trying to take, like, again, look at all sides of the triangle, expose them to
Hmm.
all sides of the triangle. How do you feel? How do you feel? So,
That's right. And my main mission within soul filling is, can we find some balance there, right? Can we find some balance and just a general acceptance and compassion that everyone is going through something within there, in all sides have the right to feel the feels and to feel the way they feel. And my only hope and prayer, and what I coach myself and I coach my kids and anyone I work with, is you can stay stuck for a little while and be in whatever place you're in, but we all do have a choice. We all have a choice every day. Am I going to move through this to the other side, to
mhm.
something, as I say, maybe some of the best days and times of your life?
Yeah.
Or are we going to remain where you are, wishing it was different and never fully living in that place of fully thriving, right? We all have that choice, and you can take as long as you need within those different stages you have to go through, but you owe it to yourself to move through those processes. And what coaches can do and what therapists can do is help you just to get through those steps, you know, sooner rather than later.
Do you think that's why that led you into being a mindset coach?
I do. I do. I think the power of the mind, that is a course I'm working on too, which is called History, Insight, and Mindset.
Mhm.
So sharing what the history is of adoption, a local college has asked me actually to teach this as a continuous ed course
Oh,
to help educate, someone who's interested in adopting. Maybe you
mhm.
have adoption your story, but how they envision it is potentially like school counselors listening, wanting to take the course. And it would only be like a 4 or 6 week where we're working out the details. Um, or even like a doctor's office team, people that work with children in the medical profession. I just spoke to a woman, I'm not exaggerating, yesterday, a new author that I recently met in Canada. We did a call like this. Well, it was just a Zoom, and we're collaborating on some things. She has 2 children through adoption. And just last week, they were at the pediatrician's, and the doctor said, do they know they're adopted? Because their family is diverse. They don't all look alike,
Yeah.
in front of the kids. It's
Ooh, that's
like,
super sensitive.
yeah, and she said to me, and I said, well, what if you said no? I guess they know now. Like,
That's
if for
automatic.
whatever reason they're 5 and 8, and again, no, not placing judgment or criticism on that doctor, but it's just this awareness, right, of what to say, kind of what not to say, and it's a very short list. It's not a very long list. So you have the history, and then you have my insight into as an adoptive mom of a lived experience that I can bring to the table, and then the power of mindset and how we can shift and work within our mindset as we go through that process.
Well, congratulations, because that seems so exciting. And again, it just further supports all the other efforts that you have in place.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, this has been a fascinating hour. I wish we had more time, but when you publish one of those books, you'll have to come back on for sure.
Absolutely. I'd be honored.
Where can people, one, find your children's books and your mother's memoir? And then where can they find you online?
Sure. So both my book Brianna's Brave Day at School and Dominica's Story, A Life of Courage, Hope, and Love are on Amazon. And they're also on my website, and you'll find all the other things that I'm working on at Soulfilling, SOULFILLING, adoption.com.
And your handles on social media, because that's different than your website.
Yeah, so my handles on social media are Soulfilling, Francine Apy. So I
Soul
think it's
filling,
just Soulfilling and then Francine Apy.
I think it's underscore by.
By and yes, because that is my logo. My logo is So Filling by Francine Apy. Thank you. Underscore. Yes. So Filling underscore. And I would love a follow. And I do have a bi-monthly newsletter that I share everything that I do. It's a quick, easy read. But I would just love it if you could subscribe and even just share it with people that you know, just to join me in this new modern adoption conversation.
Wonderful. Well, you guys look her up, connect with her, and definitely go out and research her books on Amazon. So, thank you so much for being on your first live. Let's go
Yeah.
live.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate being here very much.
Thank you so much, and I will connect with you in the DMs.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you. Have
Bye,
a good
Francine.
night. Bye.